Folks, with Tacitus today, your pushback channel. Thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about, and I've covered this before, but the issue of how mass deportation can be brought about, enacted, followed through upon. It's a key platform of President Trump's sort of policy initiatives, and I think he was pretty much elected on this platform, or certainly very much a big part of it. So how can mass deportation take place? Well, let's have a look at the logistics of it. Depending on whose numbers you look at, the amount of illegals in the United States freeloading off the American US system, freeloading off the taxpayer, is somewhere between 30 and 35 million. Again, depending on whose numbers you look at. Some estimates go as high as 40 million, by the way, but the estimate that the Democrats and the globalists try and put around, there's only about 10 or 11 million. That's bullshit, absolute bullshit. And undercounts the numbers by 3-5. So how can these mass deportations take place? Well, the globalists like to invoke, the minute the word deportation comes up, they'll go straight to 1930s Europe and say that is going to be the same as that. They'll invoke that imagery and so on, which suggests there's a lot of Jewish people in the mix there who are not only catastrophizing but also doing the propaganda, because that's their first go-to. As soon as you mention deportation to a Jewish person, they will go with barely 1 or 2 seconds in it. They will go to the Holocaust. So, but having a look at the deportation again, sheer logistics here. There are supposedly of this, and I'll use the in-between number and say 32 million. Of the 32 million illegals in the United States, between 8 and 9 million have committed a crime. This is a crime that's separate from coming illegally to the United States. They've committed another crime. Not all these crimes are serious. Some of them are lower, really kind of misdemeanor level crimes. Others are drink driving without a license, which are serious enough in my view. Driving without proper insurance, or millions of them have court dates for hearings they've never turned up for. This is a contempt of court, and also is treated as serious. If you're a straight white Christian guy who doesn't turn up for your court case, then you'll have the SWAT team arriving. But for some reason, these people don't seem to be held to that same standard. So between 8 and 9 million have committed a crime of some sort, again, in addition to arriving illegally. So they would be number one, and number one of the number ones, if you will be people who've committed serious crimes, assault, murder, and things like that. The criminal gangs should be rounded up from moment one, and why they haven't been is quite beyond. You've got criminal gangs who've taken over parts of the city in various cities in the US, and no one's doing anything about it. That's okay. Who cares? So that they could be certainly deported straight away, and that would, if you just concentrate on the criminals, as in those who have broken the law aside from coming into the country, then you'd already be taking care of 8 to 9 million. Those who are on any sort of government benefit would be next. And if you look at the measures that Governor Ron DeSantis took in Florida, that any illegal that gets free health care in the emergency sector, that has to be reported, and so on, so that any employer that employs illegals, any illegal that uses forged social security documents, all of that sort of thing. Now that would take care of, just those measures alone would take care of a large, huge number, 50% plus of the illegals in the US would just be taken up in that, easily taken up in that. If then there are measures like taxing overseas remittances, or H-1B visas, paying double tax, or these sorts of things, then that would be a huge disincentive for freeloader people to come into the United States or into the West generally. Remember, these people aren't coming out to be part of Western society, far from it. They're just coming in as freeloaders. Now, do some want to be part of Western society? Well, sure they do. But the people who are brown and black do not. Do some, a very small number? Sure, but hardly any. So the people that come to Australia, for example, to be part of the Australian society, come from other white countries. They don't come from black and brown countries. And even rural Italians and Greeks that came to Australia in the 1950s from refugee camps or after the communist uprising or the communist civil war in Greece, all this sort of stuff, even those people, they still take 3 to 4 generations to integrate. Whereas the white Europeans, white Christian Europeans, whether they speak English or not, by the way, still integrate within 1 generation. So say, or two. So say, rural French people, as an example, rural French people. So they don't speak a word of English, which means they shouldn't have really been brought in the first place. They don't speak a word of English, and yet they come from a rural, heavily Catholic community, and yet they still integrate in 1 generation. And British people and Germans and Swedes, people like Scandinavians, that sort of thing, then they too integrate typically within 1 generation, 2 at the absolute most. So, but in the case of Indians and Middle Easterners, Arabs, Arabic people, that Indians 5, 6, 7 generations on, they haven't integrated. Arabs are three generations on, they haven't, and on it goes. So if you're going to get, if you're going to look at the amount of people that aren't integrating and are just there to freeload, then and they're not citizens, they've arrived illegally, then they should be deported. Why would you keep them? You could convert their illegal status into a short-term work visa, like a 12-month work visa, that sort of thing, for fruit picking, but they can only be in certain areas, picking fruit or doing that type of stuff. But through a combination of the idea of SWAT teams running around the whole United States, grabbing people off the street, apart from being bad optics, by the way, is just what the globalists want. And I'm sure they'll set up, propaganda scenes. The screaming, crying woman with the baby girl dressed in pink, and the screaming while the cameras are all there to record it while the SWAT team, this sort of thing. Those are optics that aren't needed. So coercion and pressure and so on need to be, so people self-deport. If you can't get a job and you can't get access to any government benefits, healthcare, food stamps, your kid can't go to school, and all this sort of stuff, then you'll self-deport. You're only in America for the free stuff. You're only there to freeload. You're not there to be part of the US society. Now the Indian propaganda line they're putting around, since I was a little girl, I wanted to come to America. I have always wanted, this is my dream. I have always dreamed. They put that out, but that's a propaganda line. It's bullshit. That they dreamed of freeloading in the West. That's what they dreamed of. And there's a difference. And the minute they go back to the village of their ancestors, the husbands and brides, then that's proof positive that they're not have no intention of integrating or becoming part of an American society other than what they can take. So this is something to consider. There needs to be multiple layers of multiple pressures and exertions to encourage people to self-deport and make their continued stay in the United States impossible. Again, you're taxing all remittances, you're stopping people from working, unless they're citizens, of course. Convert some of those to, why not? Convert some of those to 1 year visas. Some, not all, some to 1 year temporary work visas, and then they go home. So there's a sort of a smoother transition. But give them free tickets to go back. So look, it's cheaper. It's cheaper to give the whole family a free bus ticket back to Guatemala or somewhere than it is to have them freeloading off the system. Now, there's another claim that the globalists make. Well, these people are working and paying taxes. What's your problem? Hey, you fucking damn Nazi. No. They're working at the lowest paid jobs, and they're living, vast numbers of people again, they're Indians that are living, 15, 16, 17, 20 to a 2-bedroom apartment. And they're all working low paid jobs and all claiming various government benefits of one sort or another, or handouts. There's a travel pass in Australia where you can travel on public transport for about 10%. So 10%, that means a 90% discount for 10% of the cost. And it staggered me as looking at I was doing public transport recently, standing outside or just next to when you come out of the trains, you go through those terminals, you got to show your ticket or scan your card, this sort of stuff. And I was watching the brown and black people, like all of them, I mean, without exception, had this fucking discount card. Now, how do they get that? I mean, gee whiz, if you're a white person in Australia, you've got to meet a stringent criteria to get it. So how did these people get it? As far as I can tell, they meet none of the criteria. They all appear to have some sort of a job or employment, and they're all walking around, the child on the way, the anchor baby on the way, the anchor baby just born, and the anchor baby toddler and they're getting all this free stuff. I mean, how do they do that? So the scams are legion. So the cost of having these people in the West, the mass migrant, freeloaders, is massive. It's cheaper just to pay them to go back. Here's a ticket to go back, and we'll even give you $5,000. It's still cheaper to do it that way than to have those people freeloading. And even if they do work, they're paying, in net terms, they're paying no tax, and many of them are being hired through labour hire, brown and black labour hire run scams, so they're not paying a lick of tax. So the idea, and yet they're able to access vast array of government benefits and handouts, including free medical care and the like. So why would any society want people like that? So it's going to need to be on all sorts of fronts. Now, on top of that, seems to be a mass mobilization of activist NGO type lawyers that are going to represent these illegals. People have already broken the law, it's illegal. Give them free legal representation. Legal representation, if you or I were to go for it, would cost tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so those NGOs are doing that also need to lose charity status. They're acting as charities. No, they're not. They're activist, globalist activist organizations. They need to lose their charity status. And if they're giving free or pro bono to these illegals, then they should have to make a deposit. They should have to put the equivalent of a bond up. They should pay the bond for these illegals in order to deter them from engaging this activist legal lawfare. And so if any organization, NGO group, church, doesn't matter what it is, it's aiding and abetting law breaking, that is, for people to come into the United States and then to stay, that should have to pay fines and place large bonds. So it's financially not viable for them to do it. I don't like going down this path, by the way. It's one that once these mechanisms are created, then they can be used by bad people just as much as by anyone else. So this concerns me that the mere idea of going down, but we're already down this path anyway. The globalists have just trampled roughshod over the law, the Constitution, everything has been trampled upon in order for them to get their way and impose their program. And so the measures to counter them equally need to be that. And it's a sad day that we have to go this far, but there you have it. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.